Yeah. I think oh crap, I didn't record my voice, whatever. Oh
Oh
well,
no.
it's fine. So we'll move into part 1C now of why relationships change or end. Personally, again, either way, part 1 I don't really like anyways, it's a bit long. Um, but why do relationships change or end? There are many reasons why. So there might be cheating, financial problems, falling out of love, so boredom, or breaking rules of relationship. Yeah, Chelsea, I forgot to turn on my mic recording. So it records the slides, but I didn't record my mic itself. It's fine, whatever. Uh, they can read the slides. It's very straightforward, anyways. So we have stage theories here, which is a theory that follows a relationship breakdown that may follow a pattern theory. Um, so let's just look at this. This is using Duck's phase model of relationship breakdown. Key study here, Mitnick. We have four phases here. The intrapsychic phase, which is the process of you looking towards yourself, dwelling on the relationship, wondering what she is getting from the relationship, evaluating the worth of the relationship, and then you move on to the dyadic phase, which is a dyad is consisting of two elements or parts, um, and this is what the phase focuses on, the relationship itself. So you both parties go over the relationship, talking, and you could be arguing about the nature of it. There might be resentment, anger, yada yada yada. And then, of course, you guys at this point might decided to split up or stay together. And then you have the social phase, which you go public saying that, oh, we've broken up, and you take the news to your friends, your parents, your social networks. Some of them might be angry because you broke up, some of them might not be. And then you have the last phase, the grave dressing phase, which is you trying to survive the fallout of the relationship. And you have a few things here that might affect this, which is hindsight bias, which may well feature in the conversations of each partner. So if you remember from the cognitive approach, the hindsight bias basically means that you focus on the things um, that are you don't you forget about the good times that you have and you focus on the bad things that's happening to you. Um, and which serves to enable the person to feel some self-validation, basically. Um, so nobody likes to fail. So these breakup stories, people don't want to feel like a loser. So they say, ah, he or she wasn't right for me anyways. So evaluating this model, how useful is it? Well, really, yeah, it follows. It has some. It follows. It does support. It does provide partial support. But really, here critical thinking here aren't changes to relationships too subjective to measure, because really if you look at these phases, it could end at anywhere. It could end over here, like you could just suddenly one day just say I want to break up, you're a loser, and you just it you might your relationship might necessarily not follow this um, model. So that's a big criticism. Um, and as I mentioned before, some relationships may be doomed from the start, which is called the fatal attraction hypothesis. So this is actually based on a film that's actually called Fatal Attraction, I believe, which is this girl and this guy meet together for the first time. They're very attractive, and then he leaves her, and then he denies her, and then she goes out on a tantrum and seeking revenge and everything. So it's a theory that just says that you're doomed from the start. The relationship may be doomed um, due to the first things that you are attracted to, basically. In other words, be careful for what you wish for. The idea that what initially attracts an individual to another person may be the very reason for the relationship to fail. So critical thinking, of course, why should it be that people are attracted to what ultimately repels them? So here, going back to the biological part 1A, evolutionary psychology would suggest that we only pursue relationships which would be advantageous for a continued survival. But the fatal attraction theory would contradict it. So why would we pursue these relationships either way? The answer is actually very not helpful because who knows? Humans are very complex and we're very fickle, so we don't really know why some of these deviations might happen. And again, it doesn't take into account of people who like having one night stands or friends with benefits because it's fun to fool around, to neatly put it. And again, cross-cultural issues in relationship breakdowns. You can have a read of this yourself. It's basically the same application. Individualistic and collectivist cultures may hold different standards and hold different rules, and it might, it might create these cultural barriers that break down relationships. Woo! Oh my God, part one is so long. This is why I hate part one. Avoid answering part one questions. They're interesting, but avoid answering ERQs relating to part one. They're really long and they're a bit harder to grasp. Part two, the group dynamics part, is something you actually, it's actually learned a lot during the the core topic also. And I hope that all of you know the Sheriff study, the Robbers Cave study. Otherwise, I will actually force you to go learn it because it's a really, really good study to have in your pocket. So let's just introduce this. Again, three parts to this section: cooperation and competition, prejudice and discrimination, the origins of conflict, and conflict resolution. So first, let's define group dynamics. It's a term which refers to the ways that we deal in which a group operates. So the rules that's written, the rules that are unwritten, the roles of group members, and how you interact with other groups. So, of course, this topic will cover a lot, not just some extent, but a lot of the sociocultural approach, mostly social identity theory, stereotyping, prejudice, and discrimination. So this is also really good review for your core topic theory. So again, cross-cultural issues in oh wait, no. Wait, why is this here? Oh, whatever, ignore that. That's not supposed to be there. It should be key goal, and I'll edit it later, but it should be key theory goal interdependence. So basically, it's writing on the elements of cooperation and competition, has been highly influential within the realms of social psychology, business, sport, education, conflict resolution. It's a very well-known writing, and he basically created these concepts of intra and intergroup communication, which is the the possible outcomes of of goals and everything. So each party in the negotiation has a goal, a desired outcome that to some extent depends on the action of the other party. A trade union, as for example, a trade union representing negotiating working conditions with the director of the company. And then you have positive interdependence, where both parties is in the negotiation and have linked goals, so that if one party gains, then so does the other. And then negative interdependence is the other way around. Only one party will benefit. So if one party gets what they want, then the party will miss out. So this is a win-win situation. This is a win-loss situation. And here, Deutsch, I think I pronounced that right, I don't know, identified specific features of cooperative interactions between and within groups. So effective communications between members, friendly and helpful approaches to communications, willingness to support each other, and tackling problems in a collaborative way. And later on in the Sheriff study, you have subordinate goals, which is goals you work together. So instead of pitting against each other, you're working with each other. So with competition here, he's stressing the need for constructive competition, which harnesses the natural talents of group members and using them for the good of the group. So competition, as he argued, can be helpful as it can clarify social mechanisms, highlighting who is the best person for the task in hand. And here we have the negotiator's dilemma. We have Tower and Heracles. I don't know how to pronounce that. Whatever. Key study here. That's the key study. And with this theory, it actually works along the same line as the prisoner's dilemma. It involves a decision-making process, so very cognitive, based on what might be conceptualized as as moves in a game, played by two players who have very distinct agenda. I want X, but I might have to do Y to get it, although Y might lead to Z, which wouldn't be a good outcome for me. So there are three outcomes here, possible outcomes during negotiation. That you will assume that there will be a good outcome if both parties cooperate, but you don't know what the intentions of the other party is. So I want to cooperate, but what if they're exploiting me? Or you can have uh, yeah, the fucking forgot the word, whatever. Or you might have the assumption that there will be a terrible outcome if one party cooperates while the other competes. So the terrible outcome will be for the cooperating party, of course, and the competing party will get what they want, which they will undoubtedly feel good about. And then there will be a mediocre outcome if both parties compete. That the lack of cooperation may mean that opportunities to maximize benefits are lost. Yeah, Chelsea, I think so, yeah. So it appears to be counterproductive when viewed in Lax and Sebenia's terms, but the most likely outcome is that both parties are more likely to compete actually than to cooperate. So that's what they found there. So again, critical thinking: does performance on a task improve or deteriorate in the presence of competition? Sports psychology literature contains some good examples of how competition can bring out the best and the worst in competitors. So one might assume that the adrenaline boosting knowledge that you are competing, either individually or as a team, against a rival would be enough to provide optimum conditions for peak performance on the field. And also you have the audience effect here, social facilitation theory, based on the idea that the sports person is actually more likely to perform well at a task if there's someone watching them. But again, the downside to this is that they perform badly on tasks at which they have less practice or skill. Um, and again, these theories well applicable to sports theory, psychology, but it can apply to other areas as well. So that's part 2A. Now we're moving to part 2B, prejudice and discrimination. So again, very clearly here, you should have learned this in the core topic part 3. I'm not going to go over it. You should know it. Social identity theory, very easy. We're just going to whiz through them. You have the black words here, keywords, vocabulary that you would want to use in an ERQ or even an SAQ. Social categorization. Uh, Remember that it might be linked to stereotyping if you're part of that group, and then that's how someone else would categorize you. Social identification, how you expectations of the group norms that you're expected to adhere to. You have social comparisons also, which is comparing yourself to another group's, I believe. Yeah, one way to feel good about your in-group is to compare it favorably to groups of which one is not members to. So again, a lot of prejudice and discrimination might stem from social comparison here, and these as well. And then we have positive distinctiveness of the in-group, so there's a level of salience, a good vocab there, salience, and the homogeneity of the outgroup. So of course, critical thinking, does this research tell us anything that we don't already know? So the use of primary school age students in Lam-Seton here, it's a field experiment based on in-group bias. It's not something that is new to psych. And if you've learned about Jane Elliott and her study with the brown eyes, blue eyes kids, still being demonstrated to show that to show out group and in group uh, things that may happen even when we are little as kids. And then we have key theory here that's very applicable to what's happening in the US right now with presidential debate and everything. Low cognitive ability predicts prejudice. Key study here, Hodson and Bursary. Basically, what they found is that both men and women who have there was a significant correlation between low childhood intelligence and right-wing authoritarianism. Fuck my life, whatever. So the higher the cognitive functioning, the less likely the person was 20 years later in adulthood to be a racist adult and vice versa. And they actually discovered that socioeconomic status and education type actually had no effect. So you can be filthy rich, but have a good level of intelligence, and you'd still not be prejudicial or discriminatory. So that's very interesting. But of course, critical thinking here, less prejudiced, or are we better at hiding it? Could it be that more intelligent adults are aware of the social disapproval of prejudice, so they're more skilled at hiding their prejudice from researchers? That's very interesting. Um, that's a very interesting thing to think about when dealing with research in prejudice. The social desirability effect may prevent them from revealing their prejudice. Uh, yeah, and then we moved to 2C. That was very short. Again, that's why I recommend answering questions that are related to part 2. It's very short and it's very straightforward. And then we have realistic conflict theory. Again, this is something you should have learnt in part 3. Robbers Cave, you should know it. I'm just going to go straight to the critical thinking of Robbers Cave. Is this the right sample? So the use of 12-year-old white boys. Is this the right sample to use to test realistic conflict theory? For a start, boys attending a camp would have been expected to engage in competition games, competitive games, and tasks that are set up by camp leaders. But this poses a problem in terms of the validity of the findings, as the sample could have been said to be biased towards competition even before the minimum groups were created. Minimal groups were created. And children are accustomed to use conflict scenarios in imaginary gameplay anyways. So the strong intergroup conflict observed by Sharif may simply have been an extension of what the boys do on a daily basis, and with a strong element of make-believe attached to it. So that's a few critical thinking points that you might have in your ERQ or your SAQ. And then another key theory, peaceful peoples. This is not learned in part 3, but basically it's a traditional Western views about conflict and conflict resolution. It tends to be based around the idea that conflict is A, inevitable, B, best dealt with by governments and institutions, C, can be reduced by threats and punishments, and D, is a positive and necessary part of life. And Bonta here, key study, typified these are societies, the studies that they found, typified by Bonta as peaceful and, to be specific, a relatively high degree of interpersonal harmony, little of any physical violence, workable strategies for resolving conflicts and averting violence. So the societies and cultures that she studied, or that they studied in. So again, critical thinking, are these strategies helpful, or they might even lead to psychological or even harmful physical harm? So yeah, you can read this by yourself. It's an interesting theory for conflict resolution, ERQs relating to that. But we now will move on to part 3 of social responsibility. This is one of my favorite parts also. Actually, the whole unit is my favorite, but part 1 and part 3 are my favorite. But they're really long. So again, 3 topics that we learn. bystanderism, pro-social behavior, and promoting pro-social behavior. And the key behavior we're looking at here is altruism. So let's look at bystanderism first. We have the key study here, Latan and Dali. And for context, of course, you guys should know the case of Kitty Genovese, where she was murdered outside her apartment with 38 people witnessing, but no one wanted to intervene and called the police. So we have a few key theories here, which is diffusion of responsibility and pluralistic ignorance. So Latan and Dali their concept of the unresponsive bystander is based on the idea that circumstantial factors override the individual's distress, concern, and motivation to help the person at the emergency, or the person who is in need of help. So of course, one theory that we can use here is the diffusion of responsibility. It's the idea that the more bystanders there are present at the scene, the less likely it is that help will be given. Because we think that, oh, someone else is going to go get help, so I'm not going to do anything. But there are other reasons as well. These three reasons right here. Lack of competence. I don't know first aid, so how do I help Kitty? Taking cues from others. No one's helping, so why should I? And then there's lack of knowledge, because you might doubt if this is actually an emergency. And then we have the second theory here is the pluralistic ignorance, which shares some features of diffusion of responsibility, which it's an idea that an individual believes that to be a group norm, to which the members of the group adhere and which they must follow in order to fit within the group. So we're looking for behavioral cues to see what others do so we can do with them. So this can actually be very well linked to evolutionary theory. We want to follow what the group does to not only fit into the group, but like to survive as a group, and it's a good example of this is their study actually. I don't know if you guys studied the study of the fire alarm study, where you've had actors sitting there, and then you'd have a participant sitting with the actors, filling out a form, and then suddenly a fire alarm goes off, and then the smoke comes from under the door. The actors do nothing, and you actually find out that the participants actually do nothing as well. They don't go get help. And so it's a really good study for you to use for bystanderism. So here, again, critical thinking of their study. Do their experiments have any external validity? Because it's all a lab-based experiment. And is the bystander effect consistent? And if so, how can this be measured? One of the main issues with trying to measure bystanderism in this way is that it only includes an isolated incident and does not give any insight into how an individual might fluctuate in their bystanderism dependent on the context. And the research on bystanderism is essentially limited because it cannot account for what drives differing degrees of help in a range of emergency and non-emergency situations. And then we have a key theory here, the just world hypothesis and the cost-reward model. So the just world hypothesis by Lerner here, also key study, Pilyavin, which works along the premise that there's a sense of rightness in the world and that people are rewarded or punished according to what they deserve. So sense of justice here. So when applied to bystanderism, may explain why some people tend to give help more than others. For example, they are deserving victims rather than someone who has played a role in bringing their own misfortune. So if you're on the streets, are you more likely to help someone who may be homeless, who's lying, sleeping on the ground, who's homeless, or are you more likely to help someone who's sleeping on the ground because they passed out from being drunk, basically? And then you have the cost-reward model here, which is a cognitive construct as it involves a bystander undertaking a calculation of whether to help someone in need or to offer no assistance. So the cost of helping may be judged as outweighing the rewards, in which case the bystander is unlikely to help. So again, like I said with the scenario, if the victim appears to be drunk, cost of helping is higher, so you might not want to help them. But the cost of not helping may also be high. So if the victim die or is attacked by others, you might feel guilty for not helping. So the bystander must work out what to do internally, weighing the pros and cons of helping or not helping. Of course, critical thinking. Why does most research on bystanderism focus on the lack of help given? Latan and Dali's lab-based research manipulated participants into not helping, in that it used real or perceived presence of others as a crucial factor in whether or not help was given. And so the use of Confederate and everything, really, that's the only way that they were able to find ways to, operationalize bystanderism, basically. And how does the just world hypothesis apply to this research? Piliavin's research found that most help was given to the victim who appeared to be disabled, with the drunk receiving only 50% of the spontaneous help. So again, we have the tendency, this supports the just world hypothesis, we have the tendency to blame the victims for their own misfortune, basically. You are drunk, so therefore you get what you deserve. And it is a way of preserving our beliefs that if we do good in life, we will be rewarded with good things. So karma, or good karma, basically. And we have part 3b, pro-social behavior, altruism. Of course, there's biological, cognitive, and sociocultural, but we're running short on time here. But basically, the biological theory, again, follows evolutionary theory. Sometimes a squirrel actually will make a huge noise in presence of a predator, sacrifice itself so that the whole group of squirrels can survive. That's what altruism is, biologically. So we have, again, kin selection theory here, that we're more likely to help others that are that share the same bloodline as we are. And again, with the study here, is the study compromised due to ethics, and does it really support the biological theory of altruism? And then we have this reciprocal altruism here also, which is proposed by Trivers, which accounts for the acts of altruism that are not directed towards blood relatives, but in case for many altruistic acts. So basically, you scratch my back and I'll scratch yours. So there's a sense of reciprocity, reciprocity there. So yeah, does this support biological theory of altruism? And is this culturally biased? And then we have the cognitive theories of altruism. There's the empathy altruism. Are we doing this based on our ego, or are we doing this based on our empathy? That's basically what this is asking you. And with the study here, Batson, how might extraneous variables affect the results? So the most mundane things actually you can talk about can be considered critical thinking. And then again, we have the negative state relief model. Very much so, like I said here, are you doing things out of ego? Like, do you want to help the person just because you feel guilt or discomfort, or you want to just feel like you're doing something good, or are you actually doing it out of kindness? So this is what the negative state relief model is demonstrating. And again, critical thinking, one of the main drawbacks of the research into psychological altruism is the difficulty of operationalizing the key variables. So very much like what I said with bystanderism, you can only really operationalize behaviors of not helping. Yeah. And then we go into socio-cultural theories of altruism. Again, cultural dynamics, dimensions such as individualism and collectivism is very important in everything that's psychology related. But actually with the study here, Levine, he actually found out that Eastern collectivist culture, he predicted that it would be higher. He would predict that the country, Kuala Lumpur, would score highly for pro-social behavior, but this was not the case. Bangkok, capital of Thailand, which is strong in Buddhist countries where karma is believed, um, is actually part of the culture, the strongly part of their culture, actually scored very badly in terms of helping a blind person. So we have to ask here: is acculturation playing a part of this behavior? Um, and then we go to the last part of human relationships, promoting pro-social behavior. And the key theory here is prior commitment. So it hinges on the idea that we are more likely to behave in pro-social ways if we are encouraged to feel responsible for assisting to someone. And critical thinking to the study, again, read it by yourself. Um, uh, yeah, we might be encouraged to uh, donate to charity. So we might feel like we're committed to, you know, do some good, perform pro-social behaviors. Again, this might, you know, you have to ask: are you doing this out of ego, or are you doing this out of your own kindness? Um, and then we have school-based interventions here, which is basically the idea that we can teach these ideas, teach kids from a young age to to promote pro-social behaviors. And again, critical thinking: does this let parents off the hook? You can read that more yourself. Again, very important here, cross-cultural research. This is something that you should always include in your ERQs and SAQs, cross-cultural research, because it plays a really big part. Um, and with Alport's research, he even wrote a book, I think. He really suggests that contact with other people from other, um, you know, cultures can help promote pro-social behavior as well. Um, the following piece of research takes a cross-cultural perspective of how spending money on worthy causes produces feelings of happiness and positive outcomes, basically from a diverse range of cultures and countries. And that is all to human relationships. I am so sorry I did not manage to record part one of the session, but hopefully part 2C and, part 2 and part 3, you guys understand, and even part 1 also, if you're watching the video. You can read the presentations. It's all on there, and it's very comprehensive. It's very detailed also, and you should understand it easily. If you need access to the study, let me know, and I can send it to you. I just can't show it to you on here just due to copyright reasons. Thank you for joining, and I shall end the recording here.